Please don't leave us here.
I won't leave my family.
Please, don't leave us here, she begged. The giant mountain man answered, I won't leave my family. Montana Territory, winter of 1886. The wind howled down the mountain pass like a starving beast, carrying with it the sharp sting of snow that bit through wool and skin alike. The sky was a low, bruised gray, pressing down on the white-covered land. Pines bowed under the weight of ice, and the earth had turned to silence, except for the storm. At the edge of a narrow trail, tucked beside a crumbling outpost long since abandoned, stood a tattered canvas tent, barely upright in the gale. Inside, a young woman crouched beside a dying fire, her hands red with cold, her eyes fixed on the pale, fevered face of the boy lying under a patched blanket. His breathing was ragged. The little girl beside him clutched his hand. Anna, is he going to be okay? She whispered. Anna did not answer. She could not lie, not tonight. At 24, Anna Whitlock was the eldest of 3 orphaned siblings. Their parents had died just weeks before, struck down by disease on the trail west. Now Anna was all they had, dragging them forward on promises and hope and a piece of paper that claimed a small plot of land somewhere beyond the next ridge. But now they were alone. The wagon train they had followed turned back when the sky began to darken, the other families unwilling to risk the pass. Anna had begged them to stay. She had screamed. No one listened. Now, with the boy burning up and their food long gone, Anna fed the last of the fire with the only thing she had left, her mother's scarf. It hissed as it caught flame. I'll be back, she whispered to the little girl, wrapping her coat tighter. Stay with him. She stepped out into the storm. Snow blinded her. Wind shoved her back. Still, she pressed forward, boots cracking through the crust of ice, each step slower than the last. Her breath came in sobs. Trees loomed like ghosts. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Something large moved through the storm. She turned toward it, eyes wide with panic, hands fumbling for the small knife at her belt. But her fingers were numb, the world tilted. Then she saw him. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, built like the trees around him. A thick beard, frosted with ice, covered most of his face. His coat was made from stitched animal pelts, his boots blackened from use. In one hand, he carried an axe. In the other, slung over his shoulder, a dead buck and a bundle of firewood. He said nothing. Anna fell to her knees. When she opened her eyes again, she was back in the tent. Warmth, real warmth. The fire was high now, thick logs crackling. Meat sizzled on a spit. The boy was resting, something herbal pressed to his chest, the fever breaking. And the giant was there. He had removed his coat, revealing thick arms and scars that told stories of war and wilderness. He was silent as he worked, slicing meat with practiced hands, checking the boy's pulse, adjusting the fire. Anna pushed herself upright. Her lips trembled. Who are you?" He did not answer. She watched as he pulled a small tin of herbs from his belt and added a pinch to a pot of water. The scent was sharp, clean, medicine. Still, she could not shake the fear. He was going to leave. He would help, then walk back into the storm. She could not let that happen. When he stood to check the meat, she reached out, grabbing a fistful of his sleeve. Her voice cracked. "Please, do not leave us here." For the first time, he looked down at her. Eyes the color of a frozen lake met hers, not cruel, not cold, just still, deep. He studied her, then the children curled beside the fire. He walked to the wall, pulled down one of his thick furs, and draped it gently over the two small forms. Then, setting his knife down, he spoke. His voice was gravel and thunder. I will not leave my family. Anna stared at him, breath caught in her chest. They were not his family. But he had said it. Outside, the wind screamed louder. But inside the thin walls of the tent, the fire burned strong. The children slept, and the giant mountain man sat down beside the hearth, eyes fixed on the flames. No promises, just presence. And that was enough. Morning light broke through the pine branches, spilling pale gold across the snow-covered clearing. The storm had passed, but winter's grip remained, deep and bone-aching. Frost clung to every surface, and the tent's canvas snapped lightly in the lingering wind. Inside, warmth still lingered from the night's fire. Gideon moved with quiet efficiency, slicing thick portions of venison and laying them over the embers with practiced care. Beside the fire, he placed a skillet and poured in a small pouch of coarse cornmeal mixed with water, simple, hearty, and hot. Anna stirred awake, the scent of meat pulling her from sleep. Her brother was breathing easier now. Her sister's tiny fingers clung to the fur blanket. "You should eat," Gideon said without looking up. Anna tried to sit straighter. "Let me help." She reached for a pan, nearly knocked it into the fire, then fumbled with the cornmeal bag, spilling a third of it into the dirt. "I am sorry," she murmured, cheeks flushed. He said nothing, just reached over and salvaged what he could, brushing snow aside with a steady hand. The children woke with sleepy smiles. They ate in silence at first, too hungry to speak. Then, as the warmth settled into their bellies, their chatter began, soft and curious. "Are you a bear?" the little girl asked Gideon. He raised a brow. "You look like a bear," she said with a giggle. "But a nice one. Can we call you Mr. Bear?" Gideon grunted. "You can call me Gideon." "But Mr. Bear is better," she insisted, smiling. From that moment on, it stuck. After breakfast, Gideon stepped outside, his boots crunching over snow. Anna followed, awkward in her borrowed coat and layers. He climbed onto the roof of the structure beside the tent, a lean-to of logs and canvas, and began repairing the sections crushed by snow. Anna offered to help again, holding planks and passing nails. Her hands were clumsy, fingers stiff with cold, but she tried. Later, he showed her how to set a snare. "You bend the branch like this," he demonstrated, large hands moving with careful precision. "Then you loop the cord, tighter." She watched closely, nodding. "How did you learn all this?" "I live here," he said simply. "I learn, or I starve." By mid-afternoon, he was mending gear near the fire when Anna returned with an armful of wet clothes from the children. As she laid them near the flames, something tumbled from his open pack, small and metallic, catching the light. She reached down. It was a pin, old, tarnished, but unmistakable. A military insignia. She looked at it, then at him. "You were in the army?" He was silent for a moment, gaze fixed on the fire. "I used to fight," he said at last. "Now I build." There was finality in his voice, not anger, not shame, just weight. That night, when the children were asleep, Anna sat near the fire and watched Gideon carefully carve meat for drying. The firelight danced across the lines of his face, etched deep, shaped by more than time. She spoke gently. "You do not have to tell me, but someone gave you that pin. Someone must have meant something." He did not look up. His hands kept working. "My wife," he said, after a long silence. "And our daughter. They followed me west. Our camp caught fire when I was out scouting with a patrol." Anna's breath caught. No one made it out. The meat sizzled. Snow fell outside in soft, silent flakes. "After that," he said quietly, "I stopped being a soldier. Stopped being a man, I suppose. Just went up the mountain, and stayed. Anna said nothing. There was nothing to say. She looked at him then, not as the man who had appeared out of a storm, not the myth the villagers whispered about, but as someone who had once lost everything. She watched him tend the flames, his shoulders broad and still, and thought how strange it was, how someone with so much strength could carry so much pain, and yet still choose to stay. The storm did not relent. For 3 full days, the wind howled and the snow fell in sheets, burying the world outside in white silence. But inside the makeshift shelter, something else began to thaw. Gideon worked tirelessly, keeping the fire alive, checking the traps when the wind allowed, cooking game, and boiling water. Anna watched him quietly, sometimes helping with what she could, washing pots, stirring stew, wiping the children's faces. The children clung to a new routine: stories by the fire, warm meals, even laughter that had not existed days ago. They no longer flinched at the howling wind. As long as Gideon was near, they felt safe. By the 3rd night, the storm softened. The wind was no longer a scream, but a breath. The fire crackled low, glowing warm on the canvas walls. The children slept curled together under a heavy fur. Gideon added a final log to the fire. Anna sat across from him, wrapped in a blanket, hands around a cup of pine tea. For a while, neither spoke. Then she asked quietly, "Why did you say we were your family?" Gideon looked at her, his expression unreadable at first. The flames lit his features in soft gold. He answered slowly, "Because when you beg someone not to leave, it means you already believe they belong to you." Anna blinked, the words catching her breath. "I did not mean to say it that way. It just came out." "I know." A quiet pause stretched between them. Then Anna shifted closer, setting her cup aside. "My parents died a month before winter," she said. "Fever. First Ma, then Pa. One night I was helping with supper, the next, I was the one burying them." She stared into the fire, her voice steadier than her hands. "We were already halfway to Montana. No one else wanted to take us. I had to keep moving forward. I had to keep the promise. I told my brother and sister we would find the land Papa bought. I told them we would build a house, start a new life. But truth is, I do not even know where it is." She laughed bitterly, wiping at her eyes. "I have been carrying the world on my back since I was 17. I never had time to be a girl, only a shield." Gideon's eyes never left her. "My wife," he said after a moment, "used to sing every night. Even when we had nothing, no roof, no dry clothes, she would hum lullabies for our daughter. I never understood why." He took a slow breath. "Then one day, I returned from a patrol, and there was no more singing, only ashes." The fire snapped softly between them. Anna reached forward, almost without thinking, and placed her hand over his. His fingers did not move. They stayed still beneath hers, rough hands, scarred and thick, made to split wood and lift stone, yet beneath her touch they felt like something more. Something that still remembered warmth. They sat like that, the fire murmuring low, the children breathing peacefully behind them. No more words. No declarations. But something shifted in the stillness. Not love, not yet, but the space where love could grow, quiet, raw, and real. And in the coldest part of the world, warmth took root. The snow was melting slowly, revealing patches of brown grass and muddy earth. Trees began to shake off their frozen coats, their buds shyly poking toward the pale sun. The valley that had felt like a sealed-off world for months now breathed open. Then one afternoon, the quiet cracked. The sound of hooves echoed from the ridge. Gideon heard it first. He stepped out of the shelter, axe in hand, brow furrowed. Anna followed him, shielding her eyes from the sun's glare. 5 riders emerged from the tree line, coats patched, horses thin from travel, but their faces were familiar. Anna's breath caught. "That's them," she murmured. From the wagon train. The same group that had left her behind when the storm came. The same people who had chosen safety over strangers. At the front of the group rode Bert Whitlow, broad-shouldered, with a swagger that always seemed louder than necessary. He pulled off his hat as he approached, though his eyes never left Gideon. "Well, I'll be damned," Bert said. "You're alive." Anna nodded cautiously. "We managed." "Barely," Bert scoffed, eyeing the shelter behind them. "We're turning back east. Paths flooded. No way through until next season. Figured we'd swing wide on our way out, see if we could lend a hand." His eyes lingered too long on Anna. She stepped back, uncomfortable. "Bert," she said, "I'm fine." "Doesn't look that way," he said, tipping his chin toward Gideon. "Living with a wild man in the woods? That's not exactly what I'd call fine." Gideon remained silent. He stood by the door, axe resting beside him, face unreadable. Bert dismounted and walked closer. "Anna," he said more gently, "come back with us, you and the kids. This ain't safe. You were always a smart girl, too smart to waste yourself up here." "She is not wasted," Gideon said, voice low. Bert raised an eyebrow. "Oh, he talks." Then, to Anna, "You seriously trusting this man? Look at him. He lives like an animal. Lets those kids run barefoot, eat meat off sticks. What kind of life is that?" Anna didn't answer. Bert stepped forward and took her arm. "Come on, let's go home." She pulled back. "Don't," she said. Bert's voice hardened. "I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to control me," Anna said. "You did it back then, too." Gideon's hand curled tighter around the handle of his axe, but he didn't lift it. His silence was louder than a shout. Anna stepped between them. "This is our home now," she said clearly. "These are my people, and he is not who you think. He saved us." Bert's face flushed. "He's a coward hiding in the woods." "No," she said, her voice rising. "He is a man who has known loss, who gave us food, shelter, protection, without asking anything in return. He did more for us in 1 week than you did the whole journey west." Bert's jaw tightened. He looked at her, then at the children watching from behind the doorway. He spit on the ground, turned to his horse. "Suit yourself," he muttered. "But remember, winter may not kill you, sweetheart, but loneliness will." And with that, he swung up into the saddle, signaled the others, and rode off. The hoofbeats faded. Silence returned. Anna turned toward Gideon. He hadn't moved. He stared out into the trees, muscles tense, jaw set like stone. She walked to him, slow and steady, and took his hand. He didn't pull away, but he didn't look at her either. "You are not alone anymore," she said softly, "and neither are we." For a moment, nothing. Then, just barely, his hand closed around hers. The wind moved through the trees again. But this time, it felt like breath. Like something alive, something beginning. Spring had settled in, gentle but certain. Snow only clung now to the shaded sides of the mountain, while the ground beneath their feet softened to earth and moss. Days stretched longer. Light poured through the trees like hope made visible. Anna had returned to herself, or rather, to the version of herself she had never been allowed to become. She cooked hearty stews from the meat Gideon brought back, made sweet tea from pine needles and wild herbs, and even managed to coax a patch of green from the rocky soil behind the shelter. She taught the children how to read, using charcoal on smooth bark. Ellie had a knack for words. Ben preferred pictures. Every evening ended with soft laughter, shared bread, and stories whispered by firelight. But not everything bloomed. Gideon was pulling away. He no longer lingered after supper. He left for long hunts, even when the stores were full. He spoke little, avoided her gaze. The warmth he had shown her in the days after the storm, the hand-holding, the silent closeness, had vanished like mist at dawn. At first, Anna thought she was imagining it. But the silence grew. One evening, after the children had fallen asleep with pine cones in their arms like dolls, she sat by the fire, knitting. The scarf she had been working on was finished, thick, gray wool, soft and warm, with a tight pattern that had taken her hours of careful looping. She waited for Gideon to return. When he stepped in, brushing the cold from his shoulders, she stood. "I made you something," she said quietly. He stopped, eyes unreadable. She held out the scarf. "For when you go out early, I know the wind still bites." He stared at it, then at her. "I don't need it." Her hands stilled. She didn't lower them at first, only stared. "I thought it might help." "I said," he repeated, firmer this time, "I don't need it." Silence fell between them like an axe. Anna slowly folded the scarf in her hands and set it on the table. Then, softly, she asked, "Why are you pulling away from me?" Gideon did not move. His jaw clenched. He turned to the fire and stared into it, the flames dancing shadows across his face. "I told you before," he said. "I lost everything once. My wife, my daughter. I let myself believe I deserved them, that they would stay." He turned toward her then, eyes shadowed, voice thick. "When the fire came, I was gone. Out hunting. I came back to ash." Anna's breath caught. "I buried them myself. In frozen dirt, I built this life, so I'd never have to feel that again." Her throat tightened, but she did not step forward. "I am not them," she whispered. "I know," he said, too quickly. "But the fear doesn't care." She stood still, eyes glistening. Then she nodded once. No protest, no plea, just understanding, just pain. That night, she laid with her sister, wrapped in her arms, humming a lullaby from their childhood. It was a song about stars and finding the way home. Her voice trembled on the final verse. Outside, Gideon stood just beyond the flap of the shelter. He had returned from splitting wood. He had heard the lullaby, heard the way her voice softened at the word home. He stayed there, unmoving, the scarf still on the table behind him. The wind rustled the trees, and his shoulders hunched against a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. He wanted to go in. He didn't, because part of him still believed that to love again was to lose again. And so, while inside the warmth of what could be waited, Gideon remained in the dark, alone, because that was all he had ever trusted. The sky had turned gray by late afternoon, thick with low, rolling clouds that pressed heavy against the trees. The air shifted, subtle at first, then sharp, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of coming snow. Anna had gone out after lunch, bundled in her coat, axe in hand, to gather firewood before the weather changed again. She had said she would not be long, but hours passed. The first flakes fell as Gideon finished skinning the rabbit he had snared that morning. He stepped outside, scanning the woods with a practiced eye. Snow dusted the trail that led into the trees, but there was no sign of her. He frowned, walked to the tree line. No smoke from where she usually made a small clearing fire. No broken branches. No movement. He waited another 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then his hands began to twitch. By the time the wind picked up and the snow turned heavy, Gideon had bundled the children in blankets and crouched before them, holding their shoulders. "Stay here," he said. "Do not open the door for anyone but me." Ellie's eyes were wide. Where are you going? He met her gaze. To bring her home. Then he grabbed the lantern and axe and disappeared into the storm. The woods were a blur of white and shadows. Trees loomed like silent guards, their limbs heavy with snow. Gideon moved fast, boots cutting into the powder, his breath sharp in his chest. "Anna," he called, over and over, his voice swallowed by the wind. "Anna." There were footprints near the eastern ridge, but the snow was burying them quickly. He followed what he could, broken twigs, a scarf snagged on a branch, the faintest impression of movement. And then, nothing. He stopped at the edge of a slope, heart hammering. The wind slapped his face. His fingers were going numb. Then he saw her. Half buried in the snow beneath a large pine, her body curled in on itself, one arm stretched toward the tree trunk like she had tried to hold on. Anna. He dropped the lantern, fell to his knees beside her. Her skin was pale, lips cracked and blue. Her eyes fluttered but did not open. "Anna," he said again, voice shaking. He pressed his hand to her cheek. "You are all right. I have you. I have you." She whispered something, barely a breath. "Please. Do not leave us." He closed his eyes, forehead pressing against hers. "Never," he whispered. "Never again." Then, without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms, light as a shadow, cold as the wind, and carried her down the hill. Back at the shelter, he built the fire high, wrapped her in every fur and blanket they had, boiled water for tea, rubbed her hands until the color returned. The children hovered, scared but silent, watching him work with a kind of quiet desperation they had never seen before. He stayed awake all night. At some point, Ellie fell asleep beside her little brother. The fire burned low. Gideon sat beside Anna, his back against the wall, one hand holding hers, the other still clutching the scarf she had once offered him. He watched her chest rise and fall. Slow. Steady. Near dawn, her fingers twitched. He leaned forward. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened. She blinked, eyes unfocused. "Gideon?" "I am here," he said softly. She looked at him for a long moment, then her gaze swept the room. "The children? They are safe. They are warm." Anna turned back to him. "I got lost. I thought." "You are home now," he said. "You are safe." Their eyes locked. He did not look away. Not this time. And Anna saw it, the shift in him. The fear that had kept him distant was still there, but beneath it now was something stronger. Commitment. She squeezed his hand. He did not let go. And outside, the first light of morning touched the snow, pale and golden. The days after the storm blurred gently into one another, like soft snowfall settling over the earth. The air turned warmer, not much, but enough to melt the edges of the drifts, enough to let the sun peek between branches. Anna's strength returned slowly, one breath, one step, one warm bowl of stew at a time. No one spoke of the night Gideon carried her home. The memory of it hung in the air, tender and sacred. Gideon said little. He resumed his routine, chopping wood, tending traps, teaching the children how to carve whistles from pine. But Anna noticed something had changed, not in his words, but in his silences. He lingered closer. His eyes softened when they landed on her. At night, he no longer stood at the doorway. He sat by the fire with them, close enough to feel her presence. Still, the question burned inside her. One morning, as dawn gilded the treetops with light, Anna stepped outside and found him at the chopping stump. He stood shirt-sleeved, breath fogging the air, the axe falling in rhythmic thunks. She waited until he paused, then walked toward him. "Gideon." He looked up. His face was already flushed from the cold and effort. She hesitated, then asked, voice steady but quiet, "Why did you come for me?" That night, in the storm, he lowered the axe. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he turned slightly, not quite facing her. "Because I would rather die in that storm than lose you." Anna's breath caught. He still would not meet her gaze, but his voice was sure. "I have lost too much, Anna. My wife, my daughter, my old life. For years, I told myself I did not need anyone else, that it was better to live with silence than to risk more pain." He reached slowly into the leather pouch, tied to his belt. "I kept this," he said, pulling out a small loop of leather, coiled, simple. Tied around it was a button, worn and wooden. Anna blinked. The button had been carved into a crude ring, its edges smoothed by hand. "It was from her coat," he said quietly. "The last thing I found after the fire." Anna swallowed. Her hands trembled slightly. "I thought I would carry it forever and never let anyone touch it." Gideon continued, his voice lower now, almost a whisper. "But then you walked into my life like winter light, quiet, fierce, and you stayed, even when I pushed, even when I was a fool." He took a breath, and then he knelt. Right there in the melting snow, on one knee, a mountain of a man who had carried sorrow like a second skin. His eyes finally met hers. "I have no gold, no fine house, nothing but this place, these children, and my heart. But if you want it, if you want me, it is yours." The wind stirred. Somewhere behind her, a chickadee chirped. Anna looked at him, really looked. His hands were rough, scarred from tools and fire and time. His shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of a life. His heart laid bare, trembling with hope. She stepped forward. She took the leather ring from his palm and held it tightly. Then she touched her fingers to his chest, where his heart beat strong and steady beneath layers of flannel and years of guardedness. "I do not need gold," she said softly. "I just need someone who would walk through a storm for me." He stood, slow and steady, and she slipped the makeshift ring onto her finger. It fit imperfectly, but it was real. It was him. "I will never leave again," he said. "You do not have to say it," she whispered, eyes shining. "You already proved it." They stood together as the light brightened, spilling through the pine branches, gold against snow. Not just two people anymore, but a promise made flesh. A home beginning in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but a heart, a fire, and the courage to try again. Spring came slow to the mountain, but it came. The snow receded in patches, revealing soft, damp earth and the first shy buds of wildflowers. The air still held the memory of frost, but the wind had changed. It whispered hope instead of hunger. And on a morning lit with golden mist, by a brook just beginning to sing again, a wedding was held. No preacher, no guests in fine clothes, no choir but the wind through pine, but it was sacred all the same. Anna stood beneath a crooked birch, the sun tracing lines of silver through her dark hair. Her dress was stitched from the salvaged cloth of her old travel skirt, patched and hemmed with care. Around her shoulders, she wore a shawl Gideon had tanned from soft deerskin, lined with the warmth of his quiet devotion. In her hair, she had twined the first snow blossoms of the season, tiny, stubborn things that bloomed through frost. She had picked them that morning herself, hands shaking with wonder. The children went first, bright-eyed and barefoot, each carrying a bundle of wildflowers. The boy wore a vest too big for him. The girl wore Anna's old bonnet, tied in a lopsided bow. They giggled and tossed petals into the air as they walked toward the stream, where Gideon waited. And Gideon stood like the mountain itself. He had washed, combed his beard, even trimmed it. His coat, cleaned and brushed, looked almost new. In his calloused hands, he held the same leather ring he had offered Anna days ago, now polished with beeswax. The wooden button carved smoother, almost shining. When Anna reached him, he reached out and took her hands gently, reverently. The brook babbled between them, and the trees swayed like sentinels. He leaned down slightly and whispered, "You begged me not to leave. Now I promise, I never will." Anna's eyes filled, but her smile was steady. Her heart no longer trembled. She had seen this man in storm and silence, in fear and fire. And she had chosen him, not for the safety he offered, but for the courage he carried. They exchanged no grand vows, just that look, just that stillness. And then, in the hush of the wild, they kissed. The children cheered, petals flew. Somewhere overhead, a hawk wheeled in the sky, and the mountain, for the first time in years, felt like it was watching something good. Later that afternoon, with packs full of supplies and hearts full of light, the family of 4 mounted their horses and rode down toward the valley. Gideon led. Anna rode beside him. The children clung to their saddles with laughter, faces tilted toward the sun. Below them, the land unfurled, green and gold, soft and endless. The seasons had turned, and they were riding not away from survival, but toward life. As they crested a hill, Anna turned back once, just once, to glance at the mountain behind them. The peak stood tall, shadowed in memory and light. Then she looked ahead, and in that moment, her voice came to us, not loud, not grand, but real, a whisper, like wind through pines, the last words of the story. "I thought we were forgotten in the cold, but the mountain gave us more than shelter. It gave us him, and it gave us home." If this story warmed your heart, like the first fire, after a long winter, if it reminded you that family is not always blood, and love can be carved from the roughest wood, then go ahead and tap that like button to let us know you felt it too. And if you want tales of hope in the harshest places, of women who endure and men who finally believe again, love stories, and ring that bell so you never miss a single heartbeat from the frontier. Because out here, love does not ride in easy, but when it stays forever.